Do we have to call
Making me
roll and
nervous,
all
to be
that
honest
kind of
with you.
Joint Committee on Ways and Means is called to order. Madam Clerk, if you would, please take the roll of the House and the Senate.
Johnson? Is present. Senator Lamar? Is present. Senator Watson? Is present. Senator Yeager? Chairman Stevens? Mr. Chairman, you have 4 Senate members present.
Representative Camper is present. Representative Faison. Representative Garrett. Representative Miller. Representative Moody
Here.
is present. Representative Sparks is present. Representative Williams. Chairman Halsey. You do not have a quorum of the House.
He's fine.
Oh, he-
He's just stepped away.
Oh, okay. So Chairman Williams, you do have a quorum of the House.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you. If we are here today for comment and action on the proposed federal aid acceptance of the Economic and Community Development Agency Department with the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, which is being made available through the United States Department of Commerce, National Telecommunications and Information. And so, Information Administration. So if the department would come forward, and I believe you have a PowerPoint. Welcome each of you. If you would, please introduce yourself and who you're with.
Hey, Brooke C. Carlton with the Department of Economic and Community Development, and work with the broadband program and several other programs. And we have some of our team with us in case we need them, but mostly going to turn it over to Taylor Beatty to run through a couple of slides that are asking for your approval to accept this federal funding.
And we are out of session.
Right. Taylor Beatty with TNECD. I'm our broadband director. I'll happily walk through the slides today, but as Brooksy said, we're here to request approval to move forward on our broadband funding through the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program through U.S. Department of Commerce. So I'll just hit on a few slides. As I mentioned, we're seeking approval to accept the $218 million in funding to be able to complete broadband deployment statewide. So I want to give just a quick overview for background on this funding source. I know we have talked to our colleagues in the General Assembly a lot about this funding over the last few years, but wanted to provide just a quick refresher. This funding is part of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law of 2021. It's administered by U.S. Department of Commerce's NTIA, or the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, and each state received an allocation based on the number of broadband serviceable locations that were un- or underserved. Up until this point, TNECD walked through NTIA's multi-level proposal approval process that's taken place over the last few years. Back in December of 2023, we submitted our initial proposal, which was really an overview of how we would implement the requirements of the program, how we would score applications, and how we would do a challenge process to determine which of those broadband serviceable locations were eligible for funding. We submitted that, as I mentioned, in December of 2023, and that was approved in fall of 2024. We were also able to conduct that challenge process with internet service providers and communities, and that concluded over the summer and fall of 2024. And then we were able to run our application process in 2025. That started in the spring and concluded over the summer. And then back in September of last year, we were able to submit our final proposal to NTIA, and that was essentially the ward list of where that funding would go in terms of the internet service provider providers and which locations would be served. There were several policy changes that occurred over the summer, and so we were able to implement those along the way. And then in February of this year, that final proposal was approved, which allowed us the opportunity to come here today and request approval to accept these funds. Just a quick breakdown of what these funds entail. That $218 million will cover service to 43,871 households and businesses in Tennessee who are currently currently unserved with high-speed internet. And this shows kind of the breakdown of where those locations are. There's a little bit over 20,000 in East, 18,000 in Middle, and about 4,400 in West Tennessee. We also worked with internet service providers who were selected based on a comprehensive and competitive application process that included things like cost per passing, in terms of technology, build out timeline, speed to deployment, and things of that nature. TNECD also then worked to negotiate with these ISPs to ensure that all the highest cost areas were also served, and that they all had a high-speed internet solution. So kind of to wrap up here in terms of what the next steps are for TNECD, we would then accept the BEAD award with NTIA, and following that, we would be able to start contracting with these internet service providers this spring. Project implementation would start in spring and summer of this year, and the estimated project completion for total build out of these locations would be the end of 2028. So that gives a pretty big overview of what that funding looks like and what's encompassed there. And we welcome any questions that you have today in the hearing.
We thank you for your presentation and the detailed explanation of not just the procedure of the acceptance, but also kind of where we've been as well. Members, will open up for questions. I just wanted to start out. To date, it looks like our records show that state and federal funding so far has been about $781 million so far. So combining this next $218 million, that's just under $1 billion for broadband deployment in Tennessee. Do you know what the original estimated cost for 100% coverage was?
So the original cost estimate, I think from our department several years back, I think was around $400 million. I will note that at the time that the kind of speed threshold for broadband was much lower. And so back in 2021, the federal government really changed that speed threshold to a higher speed, which then expanded the amount of Tennesseans that would be considered underserved. And so that's really a kind of a overview of why that number was expanded over time.
Does that explain the department released a 2024 estimate of $813 million allocated in initial proposal for BEAD, and now it's a much different number. I mean, $600 million less. Does that the policy change, or does that explain that difference in cost or the award?
Yes, great question. So that original estimate was the original allocation that the federal government gave the state of Tennessee essentially to be able to apply up to that amount. We did estimate that it would be nearly $800 million to get fiber to all of the locations. Over the summer last year, the Trump administration pulled back on the fiber preference. And so now this is a tech neutral approach. And it was something that we kind of negotiated back and forth with the feds and ISPs to get to that number today.
And that's so the satellite providers is the change.
Yes,
Part of the
satellite
change.
is satellite as well as hybrid fiber coax. So a couple of different tech neutral approaches.
And other members, sorry, I'm kind of taking over here, but anybody who wants to jump in. Representative Williams.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. I just had a question about the original $813 million was tied to a goal of connecting 100% of Tennesseans, so everyone had service. And of course, the chairman was just discussing about how the money changed dramatically. Are the numbers you showed us in the 3 different divisions of the state, are we going to be able to achieve 100% coverage for under or unserved folks with this additional revenue?
Yes, sir. This covers high-speed internet solution to all of the remaining unserved households in Tennessee.
Okay, based upon your estimates, do you expect, I know that there's about 15 million that's uncommitted, I guess, of those, of this last tranche of monies. What is the expected use for it? Or is it being retained for maybe cost overruns? Or could you tell us what the purpose for that money is? Or are you retaining it to manage the program?
Yeah, great question as well. So the remaining funding in the program, there's around $600 million left, right, of that original allocation. That is funding that, according to the bipartisan infrastructure law, states are able to access for non-deployment funding. We are awaiting guidance from the Trump administration on if we'll be able to access that funding and if we'll be able to put forth a non-deployment proposal there. Oh, and then, I'm sorry, that's a great question. So then the other piece of this is that admin funding for us to actually implement the program.
About what percentage of the dollar, or what's the total dollar amount that you're keeping for admin of this tranche of money?
Of this tranche, it's 16 million. It's exactly the admin we're allowed of that entire allocation of 800 million. And that would be something that we're also able to use for implementation of the non-deployment dollars, should we be able to get that as well.
So how do you do that? Obviously you have staff that's administering the program and those kinds of things. Once this is obviously the last of it, so that administration cost covers your existing employees to do this additional work, or are you having to hire other people just to finish this last tranche of funding?
Yes, so this funding would cover our existing employees through the end of 2030. And then it also would cover our consulting help as well to administer the grant.
Okay.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Can I add that most of our broadband staff are time limited staff right now. So we were able to staff up when we first started working on the BEAD program, time limited, so that their employment will run out when the funding runs out.
Okay. One final question. There was an area in the map that you provided as it relates to coverage that was dubbed not awarded in the Cumberland Mountain region, not awarded. What does that mean?
In terms of not awarded,
It says in the awarded beaded areas, there was an area at Cumberland Mountain that said unawarded. Does that, because if the goal is 100% and there's
Yeah,
an area that's not
definitely.
awarded, does that mean that area is not going to have coverage, or it already had coverage and there was nothing awarded to that region?
Great question. Yes, in that situation, it would be an area that already had coverage, and so it would have been removed for consideration for this program specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions from members? Chairman Watson.
I do want to follow back up on the 100% accessibility, that when we're completed with the but it really is a little bit of a change in the plan, because it's not 100% fiber. I mean, I think the original plan was there would be 100% coverage with fiber, correct? And now you use another term for alternative sources, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And that to members' questions about the change in price or cost allocation, it's because we're using other technologies to help get access, but it's still not necessarily fiber to the home in all these different locations.
That's correct.
Okay. Within the distribution, are state parks included in this?
If there are, if they're if they're broadband accessible locations, some of those are included. Several of those are already being served outside of this program. So I would say the majority of those were actually being served outside of this program. But we're happy to take a look at that as well.
Let me rephrase the question. At the completion of this project, will all of our state parks have broadband access?
I believe the answer to that is correct. We've been working with TDEC on what that looks like. And so we're happy to follow up on that because I know they were working on service outside of this program to complete that part of that process and complete service.
Last question. When we complete this, you will still have a number of homes and potentially businesses that do not have fiber. It's using an alternative source, which may be well and good. But with the development of other technologies like quantum and those kind of things, are those folks being somehow left behind because they don't have what would be considered the state-of-the-art technology, but they're using a best choice technology?
I think that's a great question as well. In terms of what we believe based on, the studies that we've done, the work that we've put in on this program, we believe all of these households are going to have a high-speed technology solution. For those that are alternative technologies like a satellite or low Earth orbit, we took into consideration things like population density and tree canopy coverage that impact the viability of that solution. I would also say that that's something that was a huge priority of the Trump administration. We've been working with them on how to both meet the intent and the new requirements of the program while also doing right by Tennesseans and ensuring that where we did use an alternative solution due to cost, that it is a high speed internet solution based on the circumstances and the environment that solution will be placed.
Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, an indulgence because there's okay, thank you. I mean, at some point not in our lifetime, but over time, eventually they will have to have fiber. It's kind of like electricity. Eventually they're going to run wires to some of these places. Correct me if I'm mistaken, okay? Because I'm reading from some notes here. In May of last year, 2025, the funding was canceled for all 3 Digital Equity Act grant programs. That cancellation amounted to about a $2.75 billion reduction. That funding was really more about adoption than it was about the funding we're talking about here today, members, is about accessibility. But one of the challenges that we have in the state isn't about accessibility. One of the challenges that we have in the state is about adoption. You can have the fiber coming to the home, you can have the alternative resource, but people still have to choose to use the resource. So do we have any plans from the state's perspective? Because the federal government says by the elimination of these programs, we're not going to do any more support around helping people adopt broadband. Does the state have any plans? Are you aware of any plans, or do you have plans of how we might create programs where we could encourage adoption in some of these areas?
Yes, Chairman, that's a great question. We definitely have plans for that. One, we have active grants that are working on broadband adoption statewide, but for that extra around $600 million that's not used in this program, we're petitioning NTIA to say we would like to use some of those non-deployment funds to really work on broadband adoption, accessibility, affordability statewide, because we recognize that infrastructure may be the largest piece of the puzzle, but it's not the only piece of the puzzle. And so that's definitely something that Brooksy and I definitely share a lot of that concern on. Once we have this built out, we have to do meaningful programs that also bolster the ability to connect to that technology in a meaningful way across our communities.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Further questions? Representative Williams.
Thank you. I want to give my colleagues an opportunity to ask questions too, but I did want to find, based upon the first few tranches of funding, obviously we're talking about adding another 60,000, maybe accessibility to 60. What has been your experience as it relates to the actual take rate or the utilization rate for this expenditure of money. I guess my point being, is this, are people actually using it now that we actually are sending them the resources they need to have it?
Yes, absolutely. That is definitely one of the things that we track the most in our grants. And if there are specific areas, we'd be happy to look at those too and circle back. But I think by and large, we're seeing take rates between the 40 and 60%. But we do have some grant projects where they're in the 80s and 90s. They're just so excited that internet infrastructure has been built out that they cannot wait to sign up. So we love to see those projects, and in those areas where they are 40 to 60%, we still believe there's a lot of work to do in terms of broadband adoption. Maybe it's affordability, maybe it's a skills gap, maybe it's just not having an understanding of how that technology works. And so that's where we're also investing a lot of our efforts as well.
Was affordability probably the number one reason why they weren't?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Just follow up on Chairman Watson's question about quantum. You did say something, first of all, about a $600 million number. What is that additional monies that you may be requesting in the future?
Yes, that would be if we are able to access the additional kind of gap between this 218 and that 813 million in our allocation. We would be coming back with a proposal to this group and to NTIA about how we hope to use that funding for, as they're calling it, non-deployment funding.
Okay. If we end up, but it's my understanding though that this tranche of money is getting us to 100%.
That's correct.
So this would be taking from 100% to improving the system with the additional $600 million.
That would be part of it. And what I really foresee in terms of the connectivity piece of the non-deployment is if we have locations where there are new builds or other federal programs outside of the jurisdiction or administration of the state of Tennessee where we have defaults or something like that, where we have the opportunity to go back and fund those locations. But beyond that, I think there's significant interest in our state in looking at the connectivity infrastructure for things like AI, quantum, and then the economic development side of broadband adoption and how we're currently building upon what we've done with some of our ARPA funding.
Right. Obviously, you guys are phenomenal salesmen, which is why we in ECD lead the states. The reason I asked the question is, as Chairman Watson brought it up earlier, it would be your team has done, the commissioner's done a really good job of selling us on the idea of quantum. He shared with us really what the total cost would be if we wanted to be in a nation leading program for quantum. In the budget this year, we do have $20 million in order to kind of start that program, but it sounds like the total number estimate is somewhere around $141 million. I guess if we retain the $20 million that we currently have, there's a tranche of another $600 million out there, and we prove to the federal government this quantum is kind of the next best thing out there. What is your expectation, and are you asking the federal government, can we use a portion of the remaining 600 to kind of plug the gap for that $121 million that's missing from what we think it'll cost to really connect those leaders in Chattanooga to the rest of the state where we've made investment in this program?
Yes, absolutely. We have been kind of talking to our partners at NTIA about what that would look like, what our options are out there. We definitely would love to be one of the front leaders in quantum and quantum computing nationwide. And I think that is really of interest to the Trump administration as well. And so that's something that we've been communicating with them about. Is that an option? What would that look like? And what are our next steps there?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Representative Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Appreciate the presentation. With all of this funding we're talking about, oftentimes we hear a lot from our communities about clawback provisions and whether we thought about it. Is it in there, and if so, how does it work? So right now, the way I understand the language, there are some clawback provisions. And so if there's a sub-grantee that gets it and they don't, they have X amount of time, they don't do the build out, what are the procedures? What would happen if they don't fulfill their requirements on such a?
So we have added in the language in our contracts, which of course are pending approval from this body, but the language in the Tennessee Broadband Accessibility Act as well that says if a grantee does not fulfill that contract and build out to 100% completion, they'll owe the money back plus 20%. And so that's something that was put in a couple years ago. So that's one of the clawback provisions. And then there's some of the additional information from NTIA about just the performance metrics as we go through the process. I think we're still waiting on some guidance and ironing out some of the guidance that they've shared with us there, but there definitely is a contingency plan there for if those contracts are not fully met.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, thank you, appreciate that. Also, they have about 4 years to deploy the service, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And they've received the award, they got the 4 years, then they missed the deadline or default. What's the provisions there?
So for the way NTIA is requiring us to do it, we're again awaiting some of the guidance there from the Trump administration on kind of the long-term clawbacks on the federal side. For us, that clawback provision of the 20% would be something that we would do. But the big thing for us is if they, from NTIA, is if they don't meet the grantee agreement, then they will owe money back on the grant. And I think we would work then with NTIA on how that looks between the state and the feds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're
Yeah,
recognized.
thank you. Last question. So if you all kind of monitor the progress and how things are going along, and if you see that it looks as if they may not get to there, is there anything that the department does to help move it along, give assistance to make sure or try to ensure that they do in fact fulfill the requirements?
Absolutely. So we do quarterly reporting that we require them to report on all of their kind of performance metrics. We also require them to report on how they're meeting their milestones. We have several milestones that we've laid out that are based on project completion. So if they don't meet those milestones, they won't get paid for that portion of the project yet. We also are going to be doing midpoint monitoring. So we will have a lot of time there on if there are any delays, how we can provide technical assistance, or if it's a situation where the provider just hasn't started part of the project, we would be working with them then to say, is this project going to be completed on time? If not, we need to recover the funds and grant them to another provider.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your
Absolutely.
response.
Further questions from the committee? Chairman Halsey.
Thank you, and thanks for being here. Is that the most onerous thing of the strings that the federal government's got on this money? Is it the clawback issues? And if a project's rejected, what recourse do you have? Or are there other onerous things that are going to be hard on your department to get over the top of? You could be honest.
I'll let Brooksy chime in on that one.
So we were very lucky that the legislature gave us state funding for broadband for our first couple of years. So this is a big adjustment for our providers to be using federal funding for broadband. Things like Davis-Bacon wage rates will apply, environmental reviews will have to be done, Build America, Buy America will be in place. So there are a lot more federal requirements that come along with this funding than some of our ISPs are used to. We have been doing some federal funding the last couple of years with this, so they're starting to understand all those federal requirements. But we do have a big burden to help the grantees make sure they are correctly following all of the federal requirements. There's probably some that I missed in there, but those are some of the big ones: environmental, BABA, and Davis-Bacon.
Do you see any of those requirements that would be a threat to existing state law the way it's written in Tennessee?
Think so. Unless you can think of anything. We manage federal funds a lot through our CDBG program and other programs. So we've got a pretty good system. I would say there are still some supply chain concerns with some of these. Every state in the country is trying to get fiber to millions of homes. And so there are some supply chain issues, but I don't think there's anything that would prevent us from following any state or federal regulation.
Further questions from membership? I see none. Are we ready to entertain a motion? We have a motion to approve and properly seconded. We're ready to vote. Madam Clerk, if you would please take the vote.
Senator Johnson? Votes aye. Senator Lamar? Votes aye. Senator Watson? Votes aye. Senator Yeager? Chairman Stevens?
Aye.
Votes aye, Mr. Chairman. You have 4 ayes in the Senate.
Representative Camper. Votes aye. Representative Faison. Votes aye. Representative Garrett. Representative Miller. Representative Moody.
Aye.
Votes aye. Representative Sparks. Votes aye. Representative Williams. Votes aye. Chairman Halsey.
Aye.
Votes aye. You have 6 ayes.
The motion to accept the grant award carries the day. I don't know what else. We're flying by the seat of our pants here. Is it approved? Does it carry the day? Chuck, there you go. It's old fashioned here in this committee. We got gray hair. Thank you for your presentation today.
Thank you.
One more thing of business, folks, not for our folks with ECD, just for everybody listening. As required by Public Chapter 512, various agencies, executive agencies, were required to submit an annual report detailing their receipt and use of federal aid in the preceding year. The chairs are pleased to report that the required annual reports for fiscal year 24-25 reporting cycle have been received by the federal aid review staff in accordance with the statute. They're now on file with the committee. Staff is ensuring they're being properly compiled and made available for review by committee members. With that, thank you for the staff. I know they've got all those reports compiled. That's a lot of work. They will continue to work on that diligently. This concludes the annual reporting requirement for this cycle. We appreciate the cooperation and timely submission of the agencies as well. And with that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. We're adjourned.